Some people run towards the center of a story. Others stand just far enough away to notice what everybody else misses. Tonight's guest has spent a career watching moments unfold from the edge, in newsrooms, in boardrooms, crisis, and culture, learning how reputations are made, broken, and quietly rewritten. And then one day, he crossed an invisible line, from explaining stories to telling one that wouldn't let him go. This is a conversation about a witness, about what happens when one moment goes viral, about truth, perception, and the cost of being seen. If you've ever wondered whether observing the world is safer than entering it, or whether stories choose us long before we choose them, this one may linger with you. This is Doyle. Welcome to Spirit Talk Show, bedtime stories for grown-ups, where we slow the pace, dim the lights, listen closely to stories that live beneath the headlines and outcomes. Tonight, I'm joined by John David, debut novelist, longtime public relations and crisis communications consultant, and the author of The Bystander, winner of the 2025 Page Turner Award for Mystery. John spent decades helping organizations navigate reputation, perception, and public fallout before turning those same questions inward and writing a novel about a television reporter whose career is launched by witnessing a violent act that goes viral, only to discover the truth is far more complicated than the footage suggests. John's work sits at the intersection of storytelling, media, morality, and consequences, shaped by pop culture, politics, sports, and a lifetime of watching how narratives are framed and refamed in real time. Tonight we talk about being a witness in a noisy world, about commercial fiction versus personal truth, about what the camera captures and what it never can, and about what it means to step out of the background, claim a voice. So wherever you're listening, settle in. This is Bedtime Stories for Grown-Ups, and this is John David.
My book was, I'm fortunate. I'm a believer in awards, and I'm also, trying to market I'm a debut author, and so I was trying to find any leverage point I could find. Mm-hmm. And I entered a couple of contests. So when I was still in the manuscript form, I entered what was something called the BPA First Novel Award contest. That was back in 2022 or 2023. Yeah. And I made the long list. There were like 2,000 entries, and they picked like 18 books for the long list. Wow. I made the long list. So that was pretty cool. And then last year I was my book was named won the mystery category for the Page Turner Award, which is a UK award, and it also won a Story Trade Award, finalist in the mystery category, and bestthrillers.com named it one of the best thrillers of 2025. So I'm pretty proud of that one too.
Wow! So give us a little. And your book is called Bystander, and it's out now. Give us a little synopsis of what it's about. What's your elevator pitch?
Yeah, it's the Bystander. It's the title of my book. It's about a television reporter. His name is Pete LeMaster, and it starts out. Pete is out covering kind of a fun. He's a kind of a fun story on a Friday night, the night before a big football game, and he's interviewing fans and talking with them, and then a active shooter incident happens. Oh, wow. Active shooter enters this retail complex, guy with a assault rifle, and Pete spins his camera around and turns it on, and then dives for cover. And the active shooter is killed by an armed bystander, and it's a very dramatic scene. And the reporter catches it all on film, mm-hmm. on his camera. And it goes viral, and it's it kind of changes the trajectory of his career. Oh, okay. But all is not as it seems. All is not as it seems, Doyle.
We have to find out. You got to buy the book to find out why all is not what it seems. So, this is your second career. You've spent your life in public relations, so you've shaped people's narratives your whole life. So, what finally pushed you to start writing your narrative? Like, why did you want to start writing your own story or story that you owned?
Yeah, it's a great question. I still am a public relations consultant. This is more my side hustle versus second career.
Yeah.
It'd be great if it was a second career. It's just not quite, it's not transferring enough, Bitcoin into my account to call it a second career.
It will.
But it's I was always a big fan of fiction. When I was younger, and I used to read a lot of novels, a lot of thrillers and stuff like that when I was a single man. And then I got married and had kids, and when that happens, something's got to give, and so my golf game went away, and I stopped reading thrillers and novels. I just didn't have time. And so when I was reading books, I would read nonfiction books, business books, stuff like that. I wrote a nonfiction business book that came out in 2016. And then my kids went away to college, and my wife and I became empty nesters, and I had more time, and I kind of rediscovered novels and started, a lot of audiobooks and mysteries and thrillers and things like that. And then one day there was an incident that happened in a mall in Indiana. And a guy went into this mall in Indiana with an assault rifle and started shooting. He killed 3 people. But there was a gentleman a young man in the mall whose name is Eli Dickin. This is a true story, happened in Indiana. Eli Dickin was carrying his handgun, concealed carry guy, and he took out his gun and he shot and killed the active shooter. And Eli Dickin, first and foremost, Eli Dickin's a hero. I mean, a real hero, not like kind of a manufactured hero. He saved lives, starting probably with his own. But I thought this was really, I was fascinated by the story. I thought it was really interesting. There's so many facets to it. I've had a lot of conversations with people about gun laws and gun rights and everything in the United States. And part of me was like, this is an amazing story, what this guy did, an act of true bravery, true like altruistic thing. Yeah. And but at the same time, you kind of say, is that the way it's supposed to be? Like, are we supposed to be like armed at the mall when we're going to buy sneakers? Is that the way it's supposed to be? And so I kind of thought about all this, and I said, you know what? This could be the backdrop for a novel. And I'm just crazy enough to try to write it. So, and that's how it happened.
Well, that's interesting that you kind of eked a little bit into Second Amendment stuff about people being armed and if that's the way it's supposed to be. But I'm wondering, I always think about he killed a man, right? And which I know he's a hero, but that man had a family who could sue him civilly, who could, he could have been charged with a crime if the cops. I live in California, and it seems like I knew someone who shot an intruder on his property, and he's in prison now because apparently he didn't do it right, or he should have left.
Right.
He should have run away. And so, these things that you're a hero, yes, but you were saving your life, but things can come chase you, and they can, mess up your life in ways that you didn't think. Not everybody thinks you're a hero is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, it's complex, right? It's a complex issue.
It is.
One of the things I thought was really interesting about that whole story was just there's so many sides to it. Yeah. And so I don't, as an example, like I'm kind of down the middle on gun rights, to be quite honest with you. Listen, we have the Second Amendment. It's in the Constitution of the United States of America. It's not that part of it's not really going to change, right? Now I can have, but I feel strongly about, okay, yes, I understand it's your right to carry a gun, but do you need a bazooka? Do you need a shoulder launched rifle, right? Yeah. Missile, there's got to be, there's a line that's probably should be moved here. Well, but anyway, at the same time, there's lots of issues out there, and I have friends who, educated me about these things, and for example, one of them is a guy that I know is a friend of mine is retired from ATF, and we would talk about his son was with my son, the Boy Scouts, and we would be talking about camping trips and stuff, and we would an issue about an active shooter would come up, and he would say, "Man, I wish I was there," and I would say, "What?" And he would go, "Yeah, I wish I was there. I think I could make a difference if I'm there." you know. And then, and you kind of, wow, that's a whole different perspective on something like this than the normal person. And then I talk to somebody else who's a someone who owns handguns and like shoots them recreationally, like targets and confidence course type stuff, and he said, the average person has no idea how to handle a handgun, and I believe in the Second Amendment, but I also believe it would be stupid to give them to teachers because they're not going to be trained and they don't really even know how loud a handgun is, right? So there's all different sides of this story that make it really interesting.
The part that I find a little bit ambiguous is it says for a well-regulated militia the necessary to the security of a free state. It's the regulated militia part that I don't think has been well defined. And some people would say that's the police force, that's the army, and does the average person need to have a gun? But, I mean, that's the part that I don't think is well defined. But, I mean, I know that, and I'm kind of down the middle too. I mean, I
think the Supreme Court might disagree with you on that part. And I'm not trying to play the heavy. I'm just saying I think that part's sort of been litigated, but at the same time, but you're right. It's like, it was the intent. What was the intent, right? And that's the question. But what's the intent? And then at the same time, it's okay. What is the right? What's the fundamental right? And that's why it's that's why it's a fascinating argument. Well, and I had another thing that happened to me was during that same period of time in 2022 when this incident happened in Indiana. Another thing that happened to me was I had a birthday party at my house. A small barbecue, and sitting in my kitchen, where things normally go. And when I'm having people over my house, I'm in my kitchen, and I have my brother and my brother-in-law talking to me, and they're both veterans. They're both gun guys, and we were talking about gun rights and gun control and all those types of things. And I don't know about you, but like I don't know if you have brothers or brothers-in-law or whatever, but essentially how this conversation went was my brother and my brother-in-law telling me how wrong I was about everything. It was like, your opinion is wrong, John. That's pretty much how this whole thing went. And so you hear all the different perspectives, and it makes for an interesting backdrop.
Well, it's an interesting conversation. I think it's something that is definitely a controversial thing to get into for a lot of people. But what I thought that you were alluding to, saying this person said, "I wish I was there," and it does feel like I hear a lot of people like aching and wishing they'd have an opportunity to be there to shoot someone. And that's the part that. But I don't want to spend the whole time talking about, because I want to talk about your book. I want to talk about you. I don't want to go off into the weeds and talk about Second Amendment, but. We do research on you, and we know that you have a background, I believe, if I'm right, in crisis communication. So did that make it easier or harder to write about like moral ambiguity?
For me, I've been a public relations consultant, a marketing consultant for 30 years, and so I'm familiar with lots of different issues. I've seen lots of stuff. I've worked with hundreds of journalists, and so. That helped me. My protagonist is a journalist. I've never been a journalist. He's a television reporter. I know, whatever. I know hundreds of reporters, if not more. I've dealt with thousands of reporters, so that helped me a lot in writing the story, because I think I have a pretty good understanding of like the rhythm of the job.
So I like to explore how you got into how you explored the viral footage aspect. So what does viral footage get wrong about the truth, or even when it's technically accurate? Like, what does viral footage do, and what does it? Yeah, does it?
I mean, it's probably mainly just context, because what happens is that you end up with a viral clip, and it's 20 seconds, it's 30 seconds, and it could very well possibly be that the story really needs 60 seconds or 3.5 minutes to actually tell the whole tale, but clipping something down, everything that happens in life is not a natural match for a soundbite. I mean, it's like it's the whole, if you're a sports fan, I don't know if you're a sports fan or not, but like if you follow like football, they always, they always talk about how a guy will commit a personal foul in football, and one guy will hit one guy, and then the other guy hits him back, and they always flag the second guy, right? They miss the first guy.
Happens in
They get
school,
the
yeah.
second guy.
Too, yeah.
And the same thing with a viral video. It's like, does it have everything? Does it show context? You know, are you zooming in on something and not seeing the whole thing? Are you getting, you know, the whole, you know, is there a forest for the trees thing happening here? Or is there something where it's just sort of too tightly, you know, you're changing the story by not having the full context of it?
So how did you, in the book, Pete Lancaster's career, it rises because of his tragedy, right? So how did you navigate the ethical, the tension of a success coming from such a tragic and awful event? I'm sure that comes up for a lot of people, because I know my family has something that happened in our past that made us well known, and it definitely caused tension too. So how did you deal with that part of it?
Yeah, I think that part of it is that it's LeMaster. Pete LeMaster is my name of my character.
Did I say what did I say?
Lancaster. You said Lancaster.
Oh, LeMaster. Okay. Sorry, yeah,
it's all right. It's all right. It's all made up. So it could have very well have been that. But part of it is that struggle is like the my character he gets some fame for capitalizing on this crazy incident, and he's struggles with that a little bit. You know, he struggles with it a bit. He's not sure what he's gonna what if he should be doing that or not. You know, if he should be gaining, if he should be getting, you know, if the fame is deserved, if the rewards are deserved. He struggles with that a little bit. Yeah,
well, I imagine people would, because but that success is success, and people usually are going to pursue it if they get it. That's interesting. So this book is we do some research on you, right? And we look you up, and we make a story about you. We have a tribute story. I don't know if you listened to any of my episodes, and this is the part where you say, of course, Doyle, I've listened to many episodes. But most people at this point say, no, I haven't listened at all.
I listened to them, but then I erased them after you canceled me last night by mistake.
Oh, gosh. I canceled, I don't know what I was thinking. I canceled 2 people last night. It's because I had, yeah, that was fun. But so what I'd like to do, if you will indulge us for a few minutes, is we wrote a tribute story about you and your work, right? So it's a very short one. If we could,
wow, okay.
The sultry voice of Howie is going to read it to
okay.
you right now. The sultry, look at you. Okay, here we go.
All right, the man who watched closely. John David made a career out of standing just outside the blast radius. When moments went wrong, reputations cracking, narratives spiraling, he was the one translating chaos into language calm enough to survive the news cycle. He learned early that truth is rarely the loudest voice in the room. It's the one that arrives late, after the damage is done. For years, he watched others become the story. Then he wrote one. The Bystander feels inevitable in hindsight. A novel born from decades of proximity to crisis without authorship. John understood something most people don't, that witnessing is not passive. It carries weight. It leaves residue. His protagonist doesn't chase heroism, he documents it, and in doing so becomes entangled in consequences he never consented to. That tension between observation and responsibility mirrors John's own journey. Because writing fiction wasn't a pivot away from his career, it was a reckoning with it. John doesn't shout his themes. He trusts the reader. He believes entertainment and intelligence can coexist. That suspense doesn't require spectacle, only honesty. In a world addicted to certainty, John David writes the spaces in between.
What do you think about that story? How did that resonate?
That's amazing. You'd be a great PR guy. That's fantastic.
Hey, that's
my career.
I need to get into this.
No, that's really great. I mean, there's for me, I mean, I have been the guy on the sideline, in the back room, in the whatever, off in the wings, my whole career, for sure. And I pride myself on not being not coming up, not being on camera, not being there. A few times I've had to, tell people to turn cameras off, but they're not. It's not my favorite thing to do.
So get us.
But yeah, no, it's really, really, really clever. I appreciate it. It's very flattering. So thank you.
Well, great. Let me tell. I mean, just for people who are listening. So what you do, you're into crisis communication. You're into reputation building and building narratives. So what do you actually do? What is your job?
So I've been in public relations is where I kind of call it where I live. For 30 plus years, and so for a long time I was what I call kind of, day-to-day, everyday publicist, where I represent companies and worked with them and pitch stories. And I, back when we had daily newspapers and back when we had, when it was, when cable news covered more than politics, I booked people. I booked my clients on television. I got them interviewed on TV and got them interviewed on, by newspapers and magazines and things like that. And then my career shifted with the times. I started about 10 years ago. I started doing more reputation management type of projects, and sort of added that on as like another aspect of my business. And then I also started doing more crisis communications. And what that really entails is working with organizations that are dealing with bad news or news that could be bad, or situations that could impact their reputation. They could impact their company, could impact sales, could impact, the very existence of their business. And it's primarily messaging, and coming up with the right thing to say, knowing when to talk, knowing when not to talk, knowing how to deal with traditional reporters, and knowing when to push back and when to give ground and things like that.
So okay, so you're a man, and by the way, I'm a half empty nester. My 19-year-old has moved out recently, but I do have another one at home. But he's only half time in my house anyway. But so you're a man, and you write these characters. Was there a character that challenged your assumptions? Like, was the most difficult character to write for you?
For me, I mean, I've tried to. I really focus. My biggest focus is story, right? I really try to keep the story moving and cooking as much as I can, and the characters that are probably hardest for me to write are probably women. That's probably the hardest thing for me to do, because I'm I'm a guy who's traditionally befuddled by women. So I've been married thankfully, and to a beautiful, incredible woman for going on 28 years. Mm-hmm. And I have a daughter, which taught me a lot. But I would probably say, I worry that you don't want to write women and write about women in a way that gets that you miss. So that's probably my biggest challenge.
It might be hard, to write. I mean, I have two sons, so I don't think and I was married for 16 years, so I don't know if I know a lot about women either. So was there was there something that surprised you about the publishing and trying to get your book in front of people process?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It's brutal. It's a complete and total slog to try to get a book published. Yeah. I spent I kind of sort of told you the origin story. I spent about 5 months writing my first draft of this book, and then I found a freelance editor who helped me clean it up and gave me some confidence in the story and belief that it was good. And then I shared it with some people, and I made some more edits, and I got it to this point where I was ready to take it to the market. Mm-hmm. And in order to reach one of the big 5 publishing firms, big publishing houses, you need an agent. And so I needed to either find a publisher who would publish my book or an agent who would represent me and take it to the publishing market. And I don't have an agent. I still don't have an agent. And it took me, 18 months to find a publisher.
So you went through the traditional publishing route. You got a traditional publishing.
Yeah, I have a traditional publishing. My publisher's a company called Thule Publishing, Thule Mystery, the imprint. They're based in California.
Well, that's great. I've had a lot of authors on. That's very rare to find a traditional publishing company. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, no, I was very fortunate. It took a long time. It took a long time to do it, but I was, that was the direction that I really wanted to take. And they've been great. They've been great.
That's excellent. So for people who are trying to get published, aspiring novelist, what's the hardest truth about the writing commercial friction that nobody wants to say out loud? Is there something that you discovered that nobody wants us to know? Maybe you're not allowed to tell us.
I mean, the biggest thing is that it's so hard to get your material consumed and read by anybody.
Yeah.
So I spent 18 months pitching my book into the agent market, and I know how to pitch. I was a PR guy for 25 years.
Yeah.
So I was used to pitching journalists. I was used to sending information to people who didn't want it. Right.
Yeah.
And so I would go, so when I was when I was a regular day-to-day PR guy, you might have a story idea and you might go to 20 different people. And if one of them says yes, it's a home run.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And here I'm going into this marketplace to try to find an agent, and I'm sending my materials, and you write it like I call it a query letter, which is just the background on your book. You try to write it with a hook and with, good information and who you are and why they should care, why they should read your sample, right, which you usually include. And then if they like it, then they'll ask you to read your full manuscript. And I'll be honest with you, I would say less than, I don't know. I mean, I pitched at least 200 agents, and I think, I don't know, 4 read my whole manuscript, 5 maybe.
Yeah.
Like that's like just getting your material to be read is incredibly difficult.
I know
and that's something that there's nothing online that tells you that. There's no podcast guy out there saying, this is what's going to happen, that you're just going to, it's this mass amount of of rejection. And honestly, I knew it was going to be hard. And I knew it was my first time, and I didn't have any credentials, and I knew it was gonna be tough. But I was like, I did not know it was going to be as hard as it was.
Well, I have a friend who's an author, and he wrote some well-known books, and he has a bathroom that's wallpapered with rejection letters. I mean, he had got that many rejection letters, and he wrote The Postman. It's David Brin is the author, and he's written some books that people know, like the movie Postman with Kevin Costner was based on it, and he wrote some other books that are big, but even, there's a lot of rejection. And I've pursued the writing path myself, and it's very discouraging because there's just even how to get the agents addresses to send it to find 100 agents to send to is really hard. So
there's some tools out there that make that part a little bit easier, but it doesn't make the rejection any easier. Yeah. But I mean, I wrote a business book, and I have an agent. I have a nonfiction agent. My nonfiction agent doesn't do fiction, and compared to this, that was a piece of cake. I mean, I probably pitched, I don't know, 50 nonfiction agents, and I had a couple that were interested in me, and eventually signed with my agent, who took my book to the marketplace, and I got a small advance for my business book, and cool. It came out in 2016, all that stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do that again. And no, sir, not the way it worked out. Much harder. Fiction's much harder.
Yeah, I got an advance to write a math book years ago, and in the process of
Congratulations.
writing it, because I was a math teacher. That's what I do on the side. That's my other job for years. And in the process, I wrote the book, but then the publishing company went under before I finished it. And so that was so I had the contract to write it and the advance, but it never really got. But I have the book, but it never really got. I think that was probably 10 years ago now. I don't think I've received it. So I know you. I know you have some writing that you potentially wanted an excerpt that you are willing to read on the show, or have us.
Yeah,
read
I found a part of the kind of the beginning of my book that's just. I think it's short enough. Okay. I kind of jumped ahead a little bit. and I think I found a good place to stop, and it's not too long.
Okay, well, let's go for it.
Does that work?
Yeah, I mean, hey,
okay.
The show can be 30 minutes or an hour and 30 minutes. There's no limits.
I'm not an hour and 30 minutes interesting.
No.
So, okay, you ready to go?
Yeah, go.
Okay, so I was slated for another live shot, but not until 6 p.m., leaving me time to catch up on messages and grab a snack. The wings, burgers, and fries, not to mention the beer, looked and smelled great, but the camera adds 10 pounds, and one wing might turn into a dozen, and a test of willpower, which I wasn't quite ready to endure. Looking fit on camera is as important as having a strong chin and a full head of hair and a brain. As I put away my handheld mic and pondered whether to down a bunless cheeseburger, I saw confused faces running from the waterfront. Then people started running and screaming like they were in a disaster movie. The fast runners were slicing through slow ones, shoving people aside and knocking people down. Women were crying. Children were screaming for their parents. Some of the bigger men picked up the women they were just holding hands with and carried them as they ran like firefighters sprinting out of a burning building. I froze. What the hell is going on? As the crowd thinned, I saw him. A man wearing a motorcycle helmet about 40 yards away was pacing in front of the High Topper sneaker store and waving a rifle. Holy shit, an active shooter. Bam! He fired a shot in the air. People hit the ground and crawled for cover. More crying. Without thinking, I crouched down, turned my camera toward him, and hit record before dropping behind the concrete planter. I hooked my foot around one leg of the camera's tripod. A few people seemed to like my planter idea and crammed in next to me. A girl in a UGA tank top whimpered beside me, curled in a fetal position. A drunk man in gator attire crouched behind me and slurred. Is this for real? Is this for real? What the fuck, man? Stay down, bro, I whispered. Do I run? Stay put? I don't own a gun, and I wouldn't have been carrying it even if I did. The only weapon I had on me was one of my buck pocket knives, which wouldn't do much against a rifle. I peeked over the planter and watched in horror as a man wearing a blue baseball cap quickly shuffled toward the shooter. He was holding a pistol with two hands, his arms extended out like he knew what he was doing. Maybe a cop, but in street clothes. Dressed like any other fan. Blue baseball cap slowed to a deliberate and methodical pace, just to the right of me and about 30 yards from the shooter, who was then holding the rifle flatly against his chest. Bam, 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 3 shots. The guy with the rifle crumbled to the ground, his gun hitting the concrete with a loud clack. Blue baseball cap then bent down and gently set his pistol on the ground before he raised his hands in the air. Holy shit, he got him, I said to the drunk Gator fan. Jacksonville Sheriff's deputies seemed to come out of nowhere and quickly surrounded Blue baseball cap. All the cops had their guns drawn, some looking around the shops and up at the rooftops. They told everyone to stay down. A few seemed to attend to the shooter. The crowd of police grew even bigger, and I couldn't see much anymore. Loud cries, unmistakably from a woman, pierced through the shattered window of the high topper. I stayed down but lay prone to stretch out and see if I could pull the tripod to me without knocking it over. While I was shaking and seeing people running and screaming, and grown men in tears, I thought the danger was over. Holy shit. Holy fucking shit. I think I just filmed some dude take down an active shooter in high def. After a few deep breaths, I got to my feet only to hear a cop yell at everyone to stay down. I slid down to one knee behind the planter and saw the number of police and security guards at the waterfront growing exponentially. Again, my gut said this thing was over, but survival instincts and guys with guns were enough to keep me low to the ground. This would be a stupid moment to be killed by the good guys. Cops started to talk to witnesses and move some folks away from the body. After another moment, I started to lower the legs on the tripod so I could reach the camera. I finally retrieved it and sat on the ground with my back to the crime scene, still behind my concrete planter. I stopped the recording and watched the camera go blank. I still had my lapel mic on, my earpiece dangling behind me. More cops and security guards were coming into the waterfront, but I was focused on my camera. This could be big. Career-changing big.
Wow, that was intense. I was getting into it, man. That is from the first chapter of the book?
Yes, sir.
Wow. You describe it it kind of sounds like a friend telling a friend. You're not relying so much on the flowery, the air, the air was thick and it stood, that kind of figurative stuff that a
Yeah.
lot of writers do.
Yeah.
It just sounds like a buddy telling a buddy a story. I like that method because it aligns with my show like much more. So, wow. So
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm it's kind of the journalism background and kind of my style, I guess.
yeah, I like that journalism because I've had police on the show and they tend to tell in a very matter-of-fact way. They're not great storytellers. They're great at telling what happened, not great storytellers because they just say A happened to B, happened to C, happened to nothing, like no embellishment at all because that's the way they're trained, right? So,
Yeah.
So where can people get it? Is it available everywhere?
So yeah, everywhere, basically everywhere you can buy a book online for sure. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I'm a big fan of bookshop.org. If you're not familiar, it's if you buy a book at bookshop.org, it asks you what your local bookstore is, and then it gives a portion of the sale goes to the local bookstore. So I'm a big fan of bookshop.org. My book's not going to be on the Barnes and Noble shelf or, at your local bookshop, but you can order it, order a hard copy from, any of the online retailers, and the ebooks, everywhere.
Yeah, I've heard about that, about publishing, that, a lot of these publishing companies tell you your book will be available in Barnes & Noble, and they don't mean it's going to be available in the Barnes. They think that means on the shelf. It just means available in the catalog, right?
Yeah. My publisher's what they call digital first, and so they don't really push into bookstores. So you can, but I've done signings at Barnes and Noble stores. They ordered them and they had them there, and I signed them and they sold them and all that good stuff. They're not, not on every. They're not competing, for shelf space with John Grisham and James Patterson and Colleen Hoover and all that. They just come up. If I'm going to be there, they might buy some.
So I'm looking at your website, which is by John David. Is that the name of the website?
Yeah, byjohndavid.com. It's a Substack.
By John, and it says on the buy section that talks about the first is my online shop. So I was thinking, it says my online shop, but that's not your online shop. It's just a shop.
It's bookshop.org, and it has my books sort of easily in front of it. So yeah, that might be a bit of a misnomer, but it's just that's kind of my first choice, because then you get, if you buy a hard copy of my book from that place, then your local bookshop is going to get a couple of bucks. So I'm a fan of that. Cool. And if you want to go and shop and find the cheapest place, then you can go do that too.
So when you say the local bookstore, like I just pick a mom and pop place, or my local Barnes and Noble?
Well, it'll ask you, for example, if there's a bookshop near your house in Sacramento, right? That's a mom and pop shop or a local shop that's on bookshop.org. They're all connected. Then it'll give a portion of the sale to that bookstore. So, for example, I think the retail price for my book is like $20, right? And if you were going to buy it, if you bought it off bookshop.org, there's a mom and pop bookstore near you. It'll ask you, what's your local bookstore? And you click on, whatever, Books are Us of Sacramento, and Books R Us of Sacramento will get $2 from that sale.
So they just send them a check for $2 and say,
they pop it into an account, and when it reaches a certain point, they can cash it.
Wow. So
that's the promise, at least. I'm not in charge of the actual accounting or the distribution of funds, but that's what they say they do.
It sounds like one would start a bookshop locally and say, send it to John David Bookshop in your local town there. But not that I was just joking, of course. But let's think about I think about the bystanders in this situation in your book. So I wonder, are the bystanders, are they morally neutral, or is choosing not to act, is that a kind of action? Like, what is the responsibility when these things happen?
I mean, it's another kind of question in the book. There's a bit of a question of ultimately who the bystander is. So you have to read it and have your own opinion. I'm sort of it's a bit of a mystery as to the title is kind of like what you make of it. And then there's a whole concept of the bystander effect. Mm-hmm. But I didn't really lean into that. That wasn't I'll be honest with you. I wrote the book. The book did not have the title when I wrote the book was not The Bystander. I eventually came upon that title. I researched it. I came up with 10 different ideas. I narrowed it down. I used some online software to do a survey.
Yeah.
And that's the one that won, and that's the one I used when I marketed it. And then it stuck, and when my publisher liked it. So
I think,
but it's not really, my book isn't really about like, the title was not on it until it was already done.
So it's interesting that you called it The Bystander, which is indicative to me it's about one person, right? Because there was many bystanders in the mall at the time, right? So, you didn't call it bystanders. You called it The Bystander, one person that's being identified and singled out. It sounds like. So that's interesting to see. We have to read it and see if that. But do you think modern audiences still have the patience for nuance?
Sure, of course, absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely.
I
think there's a couple of different things. I mean, so my book comes in. It's under 300 pages. I've had plenty of people tell me they've read it. A lot of people tell me I read it over the weekend, and and I'm deeply flattered that they were able to go through it. My book is not. It doesn't take. It's not a huge, massive thing. It's not, as you noticed, it's not full of flowery language and exposition like some people do. And those are all great forms. And I think if you look at the bestseller lists and you look at what people are buying, and it's all over. There's lots of detail, lots of I think lots of nuance in what people are in storytelling today. So I would say I'm not sure I completely agree with that.
Well, I think people would like the fact about your book. That would be a quick read. That it's just listening to a friend tell you the account of a situation that happened to you. So, if you will indulge us one more second, we wrote you a tribute story, but we also wrote you a tribute poem. So the sultry voice of Howie.
Oh wow! All right.
He's going to come back in now, and he's going to read you
the poem.
A poem, yes.
Okay. What form? In what form was this?
Oh, I'm not sure I know enough about poems to know the form.
I mean, is it like haiku? Is it like
dynamic pen?
Was a man from Nantucket? Which one is it?
No, it's not a limerick, and it's not a haiku. But it's what's that thing? What's
iambic pentameter?
Yeah,
what?
Yeah. I don't even know what it is. I don't know what it is. Is that Shakespeare?
I'll take iambic pentameter for 200.
200. Let's see. That's what it is. Shakespearean is this poem. Okay, there we go.
Okay. The space between the lens and the hand. He learned early that stories fracture under pressure, that truth bends toward whoever speaks last or loudest. So he watched, measured, waited. The camera sees everything except intention. A man lifts a phone, a life collapses, a career ignites. Between the lens and the hand lives the question no headline asks, what now? He writes not to answer, but to hold the silence open long enough for doubt to breathe. This is not distance, this is discipline. To witness fully is to accept that clarity comes at a cost.
Oh, you're done. I didn't know. I was looking up. So, what do you think of the poem?
That's really cool, man. You guys got it going, man.
So
I think I hope that your goal is to get on you should really be on an NPR station. I was gonna say you should be on an NPR station 20 years ago. This is this is like a classic NPR, whatever.
I love NPR.
The afternoon.
Send me the contract.
The afternoon
NPR.
story, the afternoon show on.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about when you're saying listening to the sultry tones of.
Doyle, I mean, no, but just just this. It was just great. It's really good. You guys are clever, man.
I want it to be. I like it to be storytelling, and hey, NPR. Let's contact my people. Let's talk about. I have spoken to Spotify. I need to grow a little bit more first, but so what is your message to the people listening? My audience seems to be people from 25 to 45. So what's the message that you'd like to? Because I wanted to ask you, when people get done with your book, right? how do you want people to sit on the final page?
First things first, it's a piece of entertainment, right? I mean, that's really ultimately what it is. There's some big issues that I touch on, but I really touched on them because they advance the story. I didn't, we talk a lot about gun rights. I didn't set out to write a book about gun rights. I just had, and again, I'm very fortunate in that I've had some folks, like I've had a lot of, there's also some veterans issues that were touched on in the book. And I've had, military veterans who've read my book and said they liked the way they liked what I did. They liked the way I treated the subject. And I'm really proud of that, quite honestly. I mean, there's one reviewer, who's a retired, Army colonel, who did tours of duty as a tank commander, in the middle in like Iraq or whatever, and one reviewer said, "I'm sending it to Colonel Steve," know, and I was kind of nervous. I'm like, okay, this is a guy. He's going to be a tough audience, and he's been one of my biggest fans, and I can say that with all honesty because he's in Orlando, Florida, and I did a book signing in Orlando, Florida, and he, basically offered to buy me lunch. So he's on my side. He's on my side. But ultimately, what I'm trying to do is tell a good story and maybe make people think a little bit about a topic, maybe learn something, and hopefully have a laugh or two. Because it's because I think some of my characters are kind of funny too.
So I have to ask you about, just a personal interest. Do you know who Gerald Ratner is? Have you heard of that per person? Being a PR person, it's a jeweler who famously in 1991 made some comments. He was speaking at an institute and he said something like how his products are total crap. And then his $500 million company pretty much went in the toilet. Like 2 days later, like 2,500 stores closed. Just because the power, I'm sure from your career, what's your perspective of how people can do that with a few words?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, there was just, we're taping this. There was a story that just happened yesterday about this. And this is highly politicized and not meant to be, but one of the Justice Department lawyers who's dealing with, she has to deal with all of this Customs Enforcement Administration stuff, and she basically said to a judge, "My job sucks," and she's stuck in the middle dealing with these crazy issues we're dealing with in our country right now, and she's in the middle of it, and basically I think she's got some she feels like she's got some difficult clients she's dealing with, and I think she's out of a job today. She said it was in the news yesterday. I think she's out of a job already. I mean, you can say that, and things. It's happened many, many times. The lady who was on the flight to South Africa who made the joke.
Hope I don't get AIDS. Stuff. Yeah, she said that. I mean,
all those things. There's a million of them, and the good news is that we're a forgiving culture, and the lady who had made the comment on the flight to South Africa. She had a difficult period, but she bounced back. She's now a corporate PR person with a much lower, lower profile, but she's fine.
Yeah.
And so I mean so there's it, but it happens all the time, I tell my clients all the time, here are the things you should be saying, here's the things you shouldn't be saying.
Well, I'm a teacher of high school students, and I tell them all the time is things you say online, the things you say in class, the things you say, they're forever, and they can, but also I like the idea that your whole life and career and everything shouldn't be defined by one thing, 5 minutes that you say that doesn't really describe you as a person, the whole person you are. I'm glad that she, because I know what she said. I know the story you're talking about. And by the time she arrived in South Africa, her career had been uploaded.
Justine Sacco, I think was her name. Justine Sacco, I think was her name.
So I was just interested to ask you about that because and that's your field, right? And
I know. I wrote a whole book about all this stuff. And listen, I think, and it's the I think in most situations you can come back. First thing is that I'm guessing that most of your audience is in the U.S.
Yeah.
We're a very forgiving country. We're very much we like like a comeback story.
I'm glad
and,
we are.
and we like to forgive people. Sometimes it doesn't seem like it, but we're pretty good with forgiving people. Now, there's some people that will never be forgiven, and there's some people who will never forgive certain people.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we're a forgiving culture, and particularly if somebody does something and they're just. It was done without malice. It's done boneheaded or whatever. Yeah. It's like, we don't condemn the court jester. We don't condemn the person who does something. They make a mistake that, one of those, there before the grace of God go I type of mistakes.
Yeah, but then we remember the politician who had that weird and that pretty, that guy, and then that pretty much ruined. He was out of the race like a week later.
Howard Dean. I'm picturing
Howard Dean. Was that his name?
I think that was his name.
Howard Dean. Yeah, that's exactly right. There certainly are situations like that when you go, but you look back on that, and you think about all the things that we've seen since then. So that was like what in the 90s.
Yeah, that was
maybe?
mild. I think that was maybe 2005, 2008.
Yeah, it was probably 2000.
But that was mild compared. I know what we see now.
So a long time ago, so 20 plus years ago, there so many things have happened in politics which we would have said back then, would say, oh, this guy's career is over,
Yeah.
and guess what? It's not, and there's a million examples of that.
Well, it hurts a little bit that you told me that 2005 is 20 years ago. Wow. So, but John,
Father Time's undefeated, Doyle.
Unbelievable. I remember all the rigmarole about Y2K and it becoming the year 2000 and the people. And I was looking at an ad today and it said somebody born in 2005 is 21 now, can buy alcohol. 2005, John. Okay. But hey, John's book.
No, listen, my kids. I have a 26-year-old daughter and a 23-year-old son.
You don't look over 50. You must have started young.
You are kind. You're a kind person.
So people can
kind soul.
But
kind soul. Just you're perfect NPR material. I'm telling you right now.
I'm gonna we're gonna do this. Okay, I'm bringing Howie all the way. But hey, so your book, The Bystander, is available in all stores. Buy it now. The thriller about a viral. So I'm kind of closing down now, so people can. So go see that. Is there any last comment you'd like to say before we say goodbye and good night?
So the only other thing is my book's a series, and so I was signed to write a series. And so actually the second book comes out in May.
I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you if there's more books, and that's good to know because then we can talk about when this episode will be released to coincide. So do you know what you know what your next book is going to be called?
Yeah, it's already available actually for pre-order. It's called The Pawn.
The Pawn.
And it releases on May 13th.
Okay.
And then I guess the other plug would be that in April, The Bystander becomes available on audiobooks, on audiobook. So it wasn't my audiobook deal came a little bit late. So if you're in the audiobook world, you can actually order that, pre-order that for April delivery now.
Well, this episode could well be published sometime in late April. So go get John's audiobook right now, The Bystander. People who are listening right now can get the Bystander book on live on audiobooks and get The Pawn available on May 13th. But thank you so much, John, for coming on. It was really fun to talk to you, and have a great night. Say good night.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Good night, John. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. And as we close tonight, I keep returning to the idea of the bystander, not as someone who does nothing, but someone who sees. John's story reminds us that witnessing is never neutral. What we notice, what we share, what we allow to stand in for the truth, the whole truth. In a world trained to react instantly, there's quiet courage in pausing and letting complexity remain unresolved a little longer. Maybe the work isn't always to be the hero. Maybe sometimes the work is to look honestly, resist easy narratives, and ask better questions than one's trending. If this conversation stirred something, discomfort, recognition, curiosity, sit with it. Stories don't end when the mic is turned off. They continue in the choices we make afterward. Thank you for listening, and have a good night. Now go make a story worth telling.